to record my video for the child observation assignment. And I have a lot of thoughts I want to get through. So I had the opportunity to go and observe my two nieces. One is named Avery, one's named Mia. Avery is 4, almost 5 years old, and then Mia just barely turned 3. And so it was really fun to kind of compare and contrast them, because they are very similar in their personalities and their mannerisms because they're sisters, and they have very similar interests and things like that, but it's really cool to see how different they are, as far as development goes. So for Avery, the 4.5-year-old, throughout this whole video I'm going to do them individually as people and what I observed individually, but I'm also going to tie them in together and kind of like compare and contrast them as well, as like in their developmental stages and where they are, because I think it's super interesting. But for example, something that I observed from Avery is that she was working a lot on her motor development when we were at the playground. Something I observed was that she would climb up a bar, kind of like a monkey, she'd like make her way up like this, and she was practicing her hanging. And I was told by her mom, because I was next to my sister-in-law Monica, I sat next to her the whole time, and she kind of just told me a little bit about them as we watched them. But something that she told me is that she's been getting better and better with her hanging. And she feels like her motor skills, her gross motor skills, are really improving really quickly. And her fine motor skills are improving, but it's not as quick. It's not as quick as an improvement. Like, for example, she's getting this hanging down, but just the other day they were peeling potatoes and Avery wasn't able to peel a potato by herself yet. So those like fine motor skills haven't quite kicked in, and they're still getting refined and tuned and things like that. So that was really interesting. She also talked about with regards to like motor skills is the ability to change their clothes. I feel like that's kind of teetering between motor skills and fine motor skills, because like, I don't know, it involves big motions at the same time, but also like tiny details, like with the way you remove the clothing and things. But with Avery, she's 4 and she's able to take off her clothes just fine by herself, but then Mia, who's 3, is still struggling with that. And so it's like, it's crazy, like the difference, like how fast of development, like how much development happens in such a short amount of time from like 3 to 4. And that reminds me of something that Dr. Frazier was talking about in week 4. Week 4 is like Thursday Thoughts. She was talking about 10 months, like the amount of development that happens from 10.5 months to 2.5 years. So she said that there's many gains in motor development in this time. So I feel like this is just an example of like how much a child grows and develops in such a short amount of time, as they get older. So yes, there's a lot of development between 10.5 months and 2.5 years, but there's also the same thing from 3 to 4. Like, it just continues to grow and grow and build on top of each other. I thought that was super cool. And so I feel like by this time next year, when Mia is also 4 years old, that she'll be able to also take her clothes off by herself. But that motor development is one thing I noticed from Avery. And then another thing I noticed was actually really interesting, and it's kind of like her identity, I guess, the way that she sees herself. Because let me see for a second. Okay, I found it. So when we were sitting and watching Avery, this was technically not exactly an observation, but I kind of saw it again throughout the time I was watching her. But Monica told me a story about how when Avery was playing with my nephew Diesel, they were playing together, and Diesel said to Avery, again, like a play situation, he said that I'm coming home from working construction, as if he had just worked a long day. He's going to come home to his family after work. And then Avery responded saying, okay, I'm going to go check on the kids. And so Monica was telling me about that. And then as I watched her, she continued to have these like identity, like they would, like for example, her and Mia played house a little bit as they were out on the playground, and she took over as the role of mother. Things like this, where she is kind of finding her identity and kind of like finding her femininity through a motherly role in a way, if that makes sense. And she's only 4 years old, so that was cool. In the textbook, it's close to the section that talks about the characteristics of pre-operational reasoning. It says this, it talks about symbolic thought. It says that symbolic thought enables young children to play together and use language to communicate their thoughts and desires and engage in pretend play, such as pretending to be superheroes or traveling through outer space. And so it's cool that you can see that symbolic thought starting to develop in Avery. And as she plays pretend play with my nephew or with her sister, she's able to engage in this pretend play, but also and to identify herself in the same way as like maybe like getting influenced by her mom. For example, like I feel like this could also go into language development, because she's probably heard Monica, my sister-in-law, her mom, has probably heard her say these things like, okay, I'm gonna go check on the kids, I'll check on the girls, things like that. And so kind of language development in the way where she's like picking up and kind of adopting the things that she hears in her surroundings. So I think that's kind of cool that she's like kind of has that instinct in her, and she's already identifying herself as a mother, you know, like playing with dolls, wanting to take care of things. I think that's super cute. But yeah, that was one of the things that I saw was a part of the assignment. It was like identity, temperament, things like that. And so this was definitely something I observed from her, is Avery's desire to kind of find her identity a little bit more. She was more drawn towards the older kids on the playground, and so she's wanting that maturity around her already, opposed to Mia, who is more interested in hanging out with kids her own age or her sister. And Mia was the exception for Avery. Avery was totally fine to hang out with her little sister, which I thought was so cute. But yeah, that was really interesting. And then going down to Mia, I feel like there's a lot more here to talk about. Mia is she's such a unique and special child. She's so cute. So she's the 3-year-old. And one thing with Mia is the fact that she's still kind of getting over that egocentric mindset. So, for example, she was having a hard time on the playground. Like, she was going to go use the slide, but she's having a hard time letting people go before her or taking turns. She doesn't quite have that empathy developed for others and what they want. So she's just kind of in the stage where she feels like the whole world revolves around her. And so I kind of feel like this could go into like social competence, emotional or moral development, kind of a little bit of everything in that way. In the textbook, right around where it talks about egocentrism, it says, the egocentric child views the world from his or her own perspective, assuming that other people share the child's feelings, knowledge, even physical view of the world. So I kind of think this is kind of where Mia is at right now with her mindset, is that she can't really understand where other people are coming from or why they feel like they would want to go before her, because she's the center of the world, right? Why would anyone want to like get in her way type of thing? But she's a really well-behaved child and everything. But that was interesting to see. And then my last thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of like with emotional development. There was this point where there's like kind of 2 stories that can go into this. But first I'll share the quote. It's kind of talking about like guided participation, scaffolding, that part in the textbook, and it says, as novices, children learn from more skilled or expert partners by observing them and asking them questions. And so when we were at the playground, my brother was also there, their dad was also there playing with them. And he had an idea for Mia. He suggested that they go down the slide together, and that Mia can sit on his lap, they go down the slide together, and then they go down the slide again, but this time he will just hold her hand and guide her down so she can try going alone. And at first she agreed, and that was completely fine. So they went down the slide together with no problems. And then by the time that they got back up for Mia to go alone, she was too scared and she kind of refused to do it. And so I feel like this was like that idea of guided participation, scaffolding, you know, like letting people observe, like Mia observed how like all he had to do was just sit down, you know, she was on his lap, they went down, no problem. She observed, and then what the quote continues to say later, it says that expert partners provide scaffolding assistance that is tailored to the children's needs, enables children to bridge the gap between their current competence level and the task at hand. And so I feel like Logan did a nice job at that by letting her go with him together, nice and easy, and then he was even about to hold her hand. So I feel like this is kind of like a failed attempt at scaffolding, but it was still an attempt. But I think that fear in her kind of what's the word? Made it not possible for her to be able to try it by herself. And the funny thing is that Monica, their mom, was telling me about how last summer Mia was able to do it with no problem, but since the winter has come and they haven't been able to go to the park as much, she kind of digressed a little bit in her ability to do these things. And so that was interesting. But then later that day, Mia was on a big chair swing, so a bigger swing, and her dad was swinging her, and they were getting pretty high, and she would tell her dad, like, that's too high, daddy, like, that's too high, and he would stop. But then later, her older sister Avery came over and joined her on the swing, and Avery, being older and more of a daredevil, she was totally fine with being pushed higher. And since her older sister was there, Mia also seemed to enjoy it, actually, and wasn't as scared because she saw that her sister enjoyed it, and so she seemed to kind of calm down and enjoy it as well. So I kind of feel like that's like a mixture of like her social relationships, but also emotional development, which was really interesting to see. But overall, it was really cool to observe kind of the difference of a 3-year-old's mind to a 4-year-old's mind. And this was only in the span of like an hour that I watched, and it was really cool. But yeah, those are my thoughts.